Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus. Coming to you on the 12th of March, the year of our Lord 2025. It is episode 730, and today we're going to talk about doing the right thing. Now, I'm certain that I have done this before. I am certain that I've used this title before, but I want you to understand that it's never too late to talk about doing the right thing. While we're at it, I don't think it's ever wrong to talk about doing the right thing. The challenge is defining what is indeed the right thing. So that being said, what are we talking about? Well, I'm going to give you an analogy. Many of you might recall that the great Ron Paul was like the one and only no vote, or, well, I guess no vote almost all the time. And he stood by his principles. Now, what's unique is I would say Ron Paul and I have very, very similar principles. Since Dr. Paul has retired from the Congress, there were only two people that would pick up after him in that same mindset. One was Justin Amash, who sadly got, mixed up in some LP stuff and gave up his seat. And the other was none other than Thomas Massie. Now, keep in mind, Thomas Massie is almost always right, just like Dr. Paul for that matter. So when he takes a stand on any issue, I immediately assume, even if I'm not sure, that he's probably got a darn good point. And before I will condemn or listen to anybody else condemn Thomas Massie, I'm going to find out what exactly is going on. So that being said, anytime Thomas Massie speaks, it's as if Dr. Paul himself is there and saying, yeah, this is not a great idea, or, hey, there's a problem here. So that is my instinctive reaction to find out what am I missing, what's going on. Now, in the instance of the latest thing, President Trump didn't like it and did the same thing he did the last time those two crossed paths. That's fine, but I would expect by now Donald Trump would have learned. Thomas Massie is a man of his word. He's a man of principle, and he's going to vote the way he thinks is right. He's going to do the right thing. And most of the time, he's not even really interested in doing deals. He's doing the right thing. Now, I understand there are some conservatives, there are some, moderates that are maybe uncomfortable with some of Thomas Massie's stances, or just like you would be with Dr. Paul's stances. That's fine. But in the Republican Party, we're supposed to be able to disagree. We're supposed to be able to allow for a difference of opinion. Now, there are some things that are, quote, beyond the pale, or some things that just can't be tolerated. They're crazy stuff. But both Dr. Paul and Thomas Massie don't cross that line in any way, shape, or form that I am aware of. So once again, if Thomas Massie, the sole representative in the U.S. House of Representatives that seems to stand on principle 100% of the time that most closely aligns me, I will leave a caveat. There are a number of individuals that are elected to Congress that stand on their principles. The only issue with that is they don't agree with me. And I got to say, and I want to carve out a special proviso, even if we disagree, or even if I think they're wrong, if the mass, too many Thomas Massies are there, if the vast majority of the time they're right, or they make a very good argument, I have enough grace, if they're on my team, to just let it go. Case in point would be my current congressman. I am very happy with my current congressman. He's not Thomas Massie, but doggone it, he's pretty darn good, and I'm thrilled that we have him. And If he should run again, I will be thrilled to support him. That being said, getting back to the point at hand. Likewise, the corollary is, if Thomas Massie's speaking, you listen, or at least I listen. I want to know why, what's going on, and what is he warning about. The flip side of that is, there are a number of other people that when they speak up, or they take action, or they get loud about something, my instinctive reaction is, what's going on that they don't like that maybe I ought to support? I mean, I hate to put it that way, but that's kind of what it comes down to now, right? You burn enough bridges, you irritate enough people, they start to pay attention and think to themselves, well, I'm kind of neutral on this, or I'm ambivalent on what this is, but if you hate it, maybe there's a reason I should like it. And that's sad. It really is. I mean, if you come at life from a point of view of, I want to do the right thing, I want to stand on my principles, and somebody you know that has no principles, or has different principles, or opposing principles, gets animated about something, you want to know why. What's going on there? Should I get involved? Should I speak against this? Should I speak for it? What's at play here? What am I missing? Now, sometimes it's just innocuous stuff, right? Other times it can be very important, and you need to know what's at play. Because that's where it comes down to, I want to do the right thing. Now, sometimes, in the grand scheme of things, you can want to do the right thing, but do it at the wrong time. Or you've already done what you considered to be the right thing, and then you found out later there are consequences that you were unaware of, or there were consequences that shouldn't have happened, or you were misled, or you were lied to, which I guess is a distinction without a difference. You made a mistake. So then again, it would come to you as, well, what's the right thing? I've made a mistake, no matter what it is. How do I own it? How do I fix this? Now, in politics, I mean, honestly, I think if you talk to any elected official, they will pretty much tell you that the elected populace generally has the attention span of a gnat. They don't necessarily mean to say that as an insult. It's just an operational observation. It's something that's understood. And if you think it's from only one party, no, I think you're sadly mistaken. I think the Democrat Party is even better at this game than the Republican Party. And keep in mind, I'm not enthusiastic about this whole thing at all, but it is what plays out all the time. So we're waiting, or some of us are waiting, to see, are there going to be any arrests at the national level? Still waiting. We're waiting to see the Epstein files. We're waiting to see the JFK files. We're waiting to see a whole lot of things. And you wonder, why haven't we seen that yet? Now, you could say, because they don't have operational control of the things that they need to be in control of in order to release them, you could say they're leveraging that to get other things that they want, and then they may or may not release them. You could say they were lying or bluffing all the time. But my question is, well, what is the right thing? If I were to tell you, and I don't know this, but just hypothetically speaking, if I were to tell you that the contents of those files would ignite a soft civil war, would you still want them released? What if I told you that if those files were released, we would potentially create a rift with one of our greatest allies? A rift that may not be able to be repaired anytime soon. Would you still want it released? What if I told you it wouldn't even be a soft civil war, but it would be a low intensity. In other words, hot in some places, mild in other places, civil war. I mean, is that really the right thing? Now, in this case, Donald Trump has campaigned on that he was going to do this. So in Donald Trump's mind, that is the right thing to do. Or at least that was part of the deal, right? And we know he's all about the deal. But is it possible there's something else at play here that he didn't know ahead of time? And now that he wants to deliver, he's like, oh yeah, I really can't do that. So what's the right thing? Now, you don't know, I don't know what he knows or what the people that are, in his circle know. Is it possible that they're preventing a bigger problem? I don't know. The same time, I would ask, would you be willing to give that kind of grace to the previous administration? Either of the previous administrations, for that matter. Now, I, for one, not a big fan of liars. I'm willing to set aside the idea that elected officials lie to get elected. A lot of them do, yes. Some of them color just outside of the line. Some of them are just serial liars. Some work with exaggeration. And then we get to the Donald. I don't think I've ever heard Donald Trump, or if you prefer, President Trump, speak in a way that was not hyperbole. I don't think the man knows how to give a nuanced, calm sentence in campaign mode. Let's put it that way. That being said, the guy's at least as smart, if not smarter than me. The guy's infinitely more wealthy than I am. And quite frankly, he's infinitely more successful than I am. So I'm hard-pressed to criticize the guy because whatever he's doing is working. But the real question is he doing the right thing? Is he doing the right thing as he understands it? Is he doing the right thing by what he thinks is the right thing for the country? I don't know. But on the flip side, when all the people line up flipping out about whatever the latest thing he's doing is, and I look and it's a bunch of leftist progressive socialists, I really don't weep. In fact, my knee-jerk response is, well, he must be doing something right if all those people are upset. Now, I find a certain amount of irony that people are bent out of shape about executive orders that Donald Trump put out, which were mostly just undoing the executive orders that Biden put out. So I'm really not sure. Why is it okay one time, not the other, unless it is you don't like what's being done? But let me ask you, is it the right thing? Do you think you should be able to get a job with the federal government and never ever have to justify your role, or for that matter, show up to the office? That you should just be able to coast until retirement? I mean, inquiring minds want to know. Is it realistic to expect that if you're quote unquote an employee of the federal government, you might actually have to do something, I don't know, that needs to be done? That you might have to justify what your job is? Now, I know there was a lot of people that were, I'm going to be gracious, had legitimate concerns about the USAID money cuts. And I'll be the first to say that initially when it was created, it probably was created with the best intentions, and at the time, the vast majority of what was being done was done with the best intentions. But does anybody really believe that's the case now? Does anybody really believe that it isn't just, a way of manipulating other countries to get them to do what we want? And if that's okay with you, if that's acceptable, then why are you upset about the tariff battle? It's just more of the same, right? Using government, or I should say government is using the economy, i.e. taxes, to manipulate other countries into doing what we want. And further irony, if you will, is these same people are whining. I shouldn't say that. They're advocating that the poor are going to be hurt or the middle class are going to be damaged by the policies. You'll excuse me if I say that rings entirely hollow and that you are not wearing any clothes as an emperor, because quite frankly, most everything that's gone on, at least in my lifetime, on the side of the federal government has done nothing but cost us more money, get us involved in things that we ought not be involved with, and quite frankly, destabilize the country and increase our debt. So the question is, if you forget the fact that Donald Trump's been in office for all of 60 days now, are we better off in 2024, when the election was, than what we were in 1912? Now, if you're aware, 1912 predates a couple of consequential changes within these United States. Among them, the income tax. Among them, the states no longer choosing their own senators, the popular vote. Among them, the Federal Reserve. Among them, basically debasing our currency by a private bank organization. So let me ask you, when you talk about inflation and your concerns about tariffs, do you understand that the creation of currency is what causes inflation? Do you understand that tariffs are maybe not helpful, but are useful and have a legitimate function? Do you understand that prior to 1913, the vast majority of government was paid for simply by a revenue tariff? I suspect Donald Trump, for his flaws, understands that it would be better to utilize tariffs to pay for government than the income tax. Keep it in mind, the income tax is really never paid for by the people you're told it's paid for. But what's interesting to me is, if you believe the numbers, 90% of the tax is paid by less than 10% of the people. That should be shocking. That should bother you. And when you see a guy like, let's say Elon Musk, who is allegedly worth $1 trillion, but is he really? Does he have access to that money? Is it liquid funds? I mean, if I own stock in a company, but I can't sell it, do I really have it? But nobody pauses to think about that. Now, it looks good on a ledger sheet. It looks good on a ledger sheet. And it's a way to kind of track how well I'm doing versus other people. But it doesn't necessarily truly reflect your cash on hand and what you're able to do on a day-by-day basis. Now, does it? Now, they'll say, well, they can get cheap loans. They can do this. You're absolutely right. They can. And it's covered by the value of their stock. And guess what? Smart, rich people play games all the time. Why do you think there's family trusts? Why do you think there's all these different versions of corporations? The more laws you create, the more loopholes they find. The more ways to abuse them there are. And if you're thinking to yourself right now, Callus, you've spent all this time talking about federal stuff. Why does this matter? Why do you care? You're supposed to be local. You're supposed to care about Texas. You're right. And here's exactly what I'm getting at. We've talked about in recent weeks the notion that you can have school choice funded by government. We've talked about the idea that government money is not in fact their money. It's your money and it's my money. They took it from us under threat of a violence at the point of a gun, even though they're usually nicer about it than that, and they distribute it how they see fit. And then they put requirements on the districts that they must do X, Y, and Z in order to receive this money. And the districts respond in, how do we comply with the latest round of requirements rather than how do we get the best education to our children? So when you look at how do we do the right thing here, perhaps we ought to investigate how are we investing our funds in the school district? What are the outcomes of the children in the school district? If we really cared about the children, which is what we're told all the time, That's something we would look at. That would be doing the right thing, is asking the question, where does this money come from? What is it doing? And what is our payback? What is our achievement that we are getting out of the money invested in this generation? And if you think it's unique to the school district, it is not. The very same thing is playing out at the city level. Now, the city of McKinney has got roughly, well, let's just say closing in on 250,000 residents. Now, with 250,000 residents, there's a number of services that would be expected to be provided by a city. And I'm going to just bring this up because I was made aware of it, or I should say reacquainted with the fact that neither Frisco or McKinney have an animal shelter. Frisco and McKinney are arguably among the richest cities in the entire state, yet they sponge off the county. Now, of course, the county really doesn't care because they're getting paid by the cities for doing that, but the cities aren't providing the service. And you got to ask yourself, why might that be? I mean, we know the city of Frisco has debt up to their eyeballs and has an ambitious growth plan, which if actually works 100%, they might be okay. We know the city of McKinney has made it its number one priority to put the airport in, spend your money to do it, and, oh, by the way, we're going to throw up some apartments while we're working that out, and a couple of government-subsidized attractions to make you feel better about all that money we took away from you. I mean, that's part of the deal, right? You have to make these deals and these transactions to get people to come in and do things and make your residents happy, but I'm just going to guess there's a whole lot of pet owners or pet lovers in Frisco and McKinney that might want to know, why is it the city of Allen, which is roughly a third of our, well, let's not say a third, half our size, has its own shelter for animals? Inquiry minds want to know. I mean, even the city of Wiley has one. Now, I understand maybe that's not the greatest priority. I do. But what's the alternative? Euthanasia? Extermination? I mean, granted, if your cat or dog is 25 years old and is, in pain, sometimes the nicest thing you can do is put them to sleep. And I'm making that up. I'm just trying to prove a point here, folks. Don't go there. But the reality is we have a lot of things that go on that we don't address. There's this recurring theme that we have a homeless problem. Why? Some people would like to say, well, it's because we didn't do the right thing and we put all the mentally ill patients out of the homes. Okay, well, why did we do that? Well, it saved us a bunch of money. Okay, but what do we get in return? We got a bunch of homeless people on the street that need help, that are victims of crime, are committers of crime, depress areas, and quite frankly, upset residents. So is that a net positive? Is that a net gain? We saved whatever amount of money it is by closing the shelter or closing the homes for people that needed help, kick them off into the street, and now we got to deal with a roving problem. So I ask you, is this something better handled at the state level, the county level, or the city level? Or might it be done, regionally within the states? Perhaps it could be done in partnership, right? 2 or 3 cities throw in with the county, which gets a stipend from the state. Okay, fine. We've got, old facilities scattered around the state that are, some of them are former military bases. If the buildings aren't actually falling down at this point, it seems to me we could repurpose them. But again, it's about doing the right thing. It goes back to the people, even the least of these, have an inherent value as humans. And we need to treat them with respect and compassion. They're our brothers and sisters. Now, I know exactly where we're going to go here. Well, hey, Callis, what about all those people flooding across the border and blah, 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 blah? Yeah, okay, those people don't belong here. They came uninvited. I mean, maybe Biden invited them, but I sure as heck didn't. The state of Texas didn't. I mean, if they want to go over to New Mexico and become New Mexico's problem, I mean, that's not really my problem in the state of Texas right now, but it could be later. But right now we have native-born, native existing people here that need our help. It seems to me that might be a higher priority than, I don't know, some kind of action going on over in Asia or Africa or Europe or Australia. It seems to me the people that are already here that could utilize our help probably ought to come first. You know, the whole concept of putting America first, or in my world, Texas first. Yeah, that's a priority. That's a principle. That's called doing the right thing. That's looking out after your own, putting your own quote-unquote family first. But is it a stretch to say that the people of the city of McKinney ought to be more concerned about the people in the city of McKinney than the state of Texas is going to be concerned about the people of the city of McKinney? Is it a fair statement that the people within Collin County ought to be a little bit more concerned about those that actually reside in Collin County than the rest of the state of Texas? Is it not a fair statement to say that the people that live in the state of Texas ought to be, I don't know, slightly more concerned about the people within the state of Texas than, say the state of California or New Jersey? And the corollary is the same, right? Doing the right thing means that New Jersey ought to worry about New Jersey first, California ought to worry about California first, and the judges that are over in California and New Jersey really have no authority to dictate the terms on which Texas operates, but that's what we allow. When we look at what we're sitting in right now, doing the right thing means that you have to be willing to say no. You have to be willing to say, as the governor, well, that's fine, court of whatever. You don't really have authority over the internal workings of the state of Texas. Our Texas Supreme Court will handle that. Our Texas Criminal Court of Appeals can handle that, but you're not relevant. This is a state issue. Now, some would point out to the Judiciary Act of 1795 or whatever that somehow allows federal courts to come in and invalidate state laws. And I would say to you is, that was never delegated by the Constitution, so they can make all the laws they want in D.C. If the Constitution didn't give them that power, it doesn't in fact exist. It would be my hope and my prayer that the U.S. Supreme Court would do the right thing and recognize that federalism is a real thing and that states do have authority and they're the sovereigns, not D.C. But until that time happens, we still have to do the right thing, whether that means taking care of the people in our own backyard or protecting our own state from intrusion from the feds. Doing the right thing means, 1, you have to understand what the right thing is. 2, you have to be willing to make a sacrifice in order to stand up and do the right thing. And 3, you're going to have to be willing to face the potential consequences of doing that right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing is as simple as standing up and saying, stop. No more. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, you're done. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, I heard you, but you're wrong. Sometimes it's more involved. You have to figure out the nuances. You have to understand what's all at play. You have to be willing to take the time to think about it and consider. There is a whole lot of things that we would call gray that are just a layered approach to something that, quite frankly, could be black and white if you were to get rid of all the filters. And then there's sometimes where doing the right thing is too costly. I mean, we're all guilty of this from time to time, right? Do you want to die on that hill? I don't. Do you want to stand alone for something that you're sure to lose? It depends. Are you willing to give up your life for something that in the end doesn't really change anything? Not me. Are you willing to sacrifice this in order to live to fight another day? Are you willing to take the loss or pass up this fight so that you can function and be available for the next thing that's coming down the line? Yeah, you got to be willing to do that sometimes too. So doing the right thing requires being able to think more than what's right in front of your face. It requires you to be able to consider everything else that's at play. Do you sacrifice now to get a longer term strategy in place? Or do you bide your time until it's ready to take your action? It depends. You have to know what's going on. You have to know what the end game is. You have to know, really, what is the right thing? What's the most important thing? And ultimately, that always comes down to, who do you serve? Now I'm going to say, I'm going to quote Joshua here, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Now that being said, I fully realize different people may serve the same Lord that I do that have different opinions or different thoughts or different principles or different priorities. And I'm okay with that. There are a lot of things that it's okay to disagree on. There's a little bit of nuance allowed. There's a little bit of understanding that plays out. Not everybody's called to the same thing. We don't seek to be a stumbling block for our brother. We seek to be an encouragement. We seek to have their back. In my opinion, doing the right thing is sometimes being willing to sacrifice yourself to protect your brother, metaphorically. Could be your sister. But other times it requires that you're going to have to take a hit. You're going to end up paying a price. No, most of the time you're going to come through on the other side and it'll probably be okay, but you're going to have those wounds. You're going to have some costs associated with it. But if you're doing the right thing, you can do it with a clear conscience. If you're doing the right thing, you can feel good even if you took the loss. If you're doing the right thing, you know at the end of the day, you're going to have a clear conscience. And what's really funny about this is two people can have the opposing ideas or opposing principles and believe they're doing the right thing, and strictly based on that, they would both be right. But then you have to look at, who are they serving? And if you're not serving the right person, no matter how much you're right, no matter how principled you are, you can still be wrong. That's just a consequence of living in a fallen world, I would imagine. Well, I've beat this dead horse a bit. Let me stop. Let me remind you, if you want to help me, if you want to make a difference in this podcast for me, the best way you can do that is to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Follow me on the social media of your choice. Join me on the podcatcher of your choice. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Podbean. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, TuneIn, and Stitcher. You can find me pretty much anywhere in your podcast. And believe it or not, you can still find me on YouTube. That being said, on the social media side, you can join me over on Facebook. I've got a page and a group, According to Callus. You can find me at Gab. I am a pro there at According to Callus. I drop in at MeWe, and I have an X handle that I don't really use, but it's there. At some point, we're going to figure out how to make that work and be efficient. But right now, we got a lot of irons in the fire. I'm doing my level best to try and get you 3 episodes a week and failing miserably. But there's a lot going on right now, and it's an exciting time. And we're going to start thinking about, how do we do this in our own backyard? So I'm asking you, come along for the ride. Join me if you wish. This has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.
Canceled by the big tech mafia, but inadvertently profiting from owning their stocks in a mutual fund or ETF? At Two Pillars, they believe that censorship is a form of violence and a business practice that does not promote human flourishing. In many cases, through their investigative screening process, they can help you divest from companies that are denying your God-given, inalienable right to speak freely. Hey, Patriots, Two Pillars believes it's time for conservatives to align their values and investments. Two Pillars is your place for impact investing in the parallel economy. Find out what's in your investment portfolio with a complimentary portfolio review. Contact them today to learn more. Call toll-free at 833-377-0051 or send an email to info@twopillarsam.com. That's info@twopillarsam.com. Get started today. Advisory services are offered through Jacob and Boaz Asset Management, LLC, doing business as Two Pillars Asset Management or Two Pillars, a registered investment advisor in the states of Texas and California. Two Pillars is not endorsed by any government agency and is not engaged in the practice of law or tax advice.